The grand hall of the Karel Dominion shone with golden light. Tall pillars rose into the air, carved with the stories of ancient victories. The nobles of the Karel stood in silence, their silver and blue robes fluttering softly in the cold breeze that flowed through the chamber. Every gaze was fixed on the throne, where Princess Elira sat with her head held high. Her silver eyes were sharp, her dark hair braided with tiny crystals that shimmered under the light. To her people, she was the image of strength and grace, the last jewel of the royal line. But inside her chest, her heart was heavy. She had been told this gathering would be important, but she did not expect the words that were spoken next. The High Chancellor stepped forward, his voice echoing across the hall. By decree of the Council, for the sake of peace and alliance, Princess Elira of the Karel Dominion shall be bound in marriage to a human. The words fell like a blade. The hall, once silent, erupted in whispers. Nobles leaned close to one another, their voices filled with shock, anger, or cruel amusement. A human, one sneered. Surely this is a mistake. An insult to the royal bloodline. Elira's jaw tightened. She kept her face calm, but inside her soul was on fire. Her people held marriage as sacred, a bond of heart and spirit, not of politics. And now they wanted her to give herself to a stranger from another world. She rose slowly from her throne, the fabric of her gown trailing behind her like a dark river. Her voice cut through the noise. Explain this to me. Why a human? The Chancellor bowed his head. The humans have proven themselves loyal in the war. They are our allies, and their worlds stand beside us. A union will bind our futures together. It is not only wise, it is necessary. Elira's hands tightened beneath her robes. Necessary. That word struck her like poison. To her council, her marriage was not about love or choice. It was about strategy. It was about making her a tool. Her gaze swept the hall, meeting the eyes of her people. Some looked away in shame. Others stared boldly, as if challenging her to refuse. But Elira felt the chains tightening already. In her heart, a storm raged. She had heard of humans, seen their ambassadors, their soldiers, fragile creatures with soft skin, clumsy bodies, and short lives. They were brave, yes, but they were not Karel. They were not like her. And now one of them would be her husband. She wanted to scream. She wanted to shout that she was not a prize to be traded, not a symbol to be tied to a foreigner. But a princess could not scream. A princess had to stand tall. Her voice was steady when she spoke again, though every word tasted like ash. And who? She asked coldly. Is this human? The Chancellor straightened, his old eyes searching hers. His name is Captain Elias Ward, a soldier chosen for his honor, his courage, and his loyalty to his people. The name meant nothing to her, just another human face, another pawn in a game she had never agreed to play. Elira turned her gaze to the far window of the hall, where the twin moons shone over the capital city. Beyond them, stars stretched into infinity. For the first time in her life, the universe felt like a cage. When the council dismissed, she walked back to her private chambers alone. The corridors were empty, her footsteps echoing against the cold stone. She carried herself with the grace expected of a princess, but her thoughts were sharp, broken pieces inside her mind. How could they do this to her? How could they ask her to bind her spirit to someone she did not know, someone not even of her kind? Inside her chambers, where no eyes could see, she let herself tremble. She pressed her hands against her heart as if to protect it from being stolen. She thought of her ancestors, warriors and queens who had ruled with fire in their blood. None of them had bowed to another species. None of them had been forced into a bond without choice. And now it was her fate. Princess Elira whispered into the empty air, her voice breaking for the first time that day. I will never love him. But even as the words left her lips, a strange unease stirred in her chest. A small, quiet fear she could not name, because she had learned long ago. Fate had a cruel way of breaking promises. The next day came with heavy clouds over the Karel capital. The palace guards stood at attention, their silver spears raised high as the sound of a human shuttle echoed through the skies. The vessel descended slowly, its dark hull reflecting the pale light of the twin moons. Inside her chamber, Princess Elira stood by the balcony, her hands pressed against the cold railing. She could see the shuttle landing in the courtyard below. The moment she dreaded had arrived. Elira felt no curiosity. Her heart was a locked door. To her, this human was not a man, he was a symbol of her chains. The gates opened. and Captain Elias Ward stepped forward. He wore the dark uniform of the Human Alliance. His shoulders squared, his posture strong but unpretentious. His hair was dark, cut short like a soldier's. His face carried lines not of age but of war. And his eyes, those strange human eyes, were steady, calm and searching. The Karel nobles lined the courtyard, their expressions stiff with disdain. To them he was nothing but a fragile outsider. Elira could feel their anger through the walls of the palace. When Elias walked forward, he did not flinch. He did not bow too deeply nor act with false pride. He gave a respectful gesture, simple but honest. And when his gaze rose, it met Elira's. For a brief moment, their eyes locked across the distance. Her heart did not soften. Instead, it tightened. She turned away, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of her attention. Later, in the great hall, the introduction ceremony was held. The nobles gathered in a circle, their robes glittering with jewels, their eyes sharp as knives. Elira sat on her throne, her face carved from stone. The Chancellor spoke again. "People of Karel, behold Captain Elias Ward of the Human Alliance. He stands before us, chosen for his courage, his loyalty, and his honor. He comes not as conqueror, not as guest, but as one who will join our bloodline." Whispers erupted like storm winds. Some nobles looked away in disgust. Others whispered in mocking tones. Elias stood in the center, alone but not shaken. His voice, when he finally spoke, was steady and low. "I am honored to be here. I know this union is not simple. I know it may bring doubt and anger. But I swear this, my loyalty is not only to my people but also to yours. I will protect this alliance with my life." The words were plain, without poetry, yet they held weight. Elira listened, but her heart remained unmoved. She rose to her feet, her robe flowing like water, and descended the steps of her throne. The hall grew silent as she approached him. She stopped only a breath away, her silver eyes burning into his human face. "Do you understand what this means, Captain?" She asked coldly. "Marriage in our culture is not a bargain. It is binding, eternal. It ties not only bodies but souls. Do you think your fragile human spirit is worthy of such a bond?" The hall held its breath. Elias did not falter. His eyes did not drop. "I don't claim worth, Princess. I only offer what I am. If it is not enough, then let the stars judge me." For the first time, Elira blinked. His answer was not proud, not arrogant. It was something else, something she could not name, but she would not allow herself to be swayed. Her voice cut through the silence like steel. "Do not mistake my silence for acceptance. You are here by command, not by choice. Do not think that patience or words will win me." Elias nodded once. "I understand." With that, she turned her back and walked away, her robe sweeping behind her. The nobles whispered again, their voices like knives cutting the air. Some mocked Elias, some pitied him, but Elias did not speak another word. He stood firm like a soldier on the battlefield, enduring the storm without flinching. That night, Elira sat alone in her chamber, her chest heavy. She replayed his words in her mind against her will. "I only offer what I am." It was not love. It was not enough. But why then did the memory of his calm gaze disturb her so deeply? For the first time, the princess felt that this human might not be as simple as she wished him to be. The first days after Captain Elias Ward's arrival passed like winter storms inside the palace. Wherever Princess Elira went, the human was not far behind. At banquets, he sat near her, quiet and careful with every word. During official walks through the gardens, he followed at a respectful distance. He never pushed forward, never demanded her attention, and Elira gave him nothing. When he greeted her with a simple, "Good morning," she answered with a nod or a single word. When he asked questions about her world, she replied in short, sharp phrases that killed the conversation. At meals, she often excused herself before the first course was finished, leaving him alone at the long table under the watchful eyes of the nobles. The nobles whispered about it daily. Some laughed at Elias, calling him a fool. Others shook their heads, saying the human would never survive the pride of a Karel princess. But Elias never raised his voice. He never argued. He endured the cold silence as though he had expected it all along. One evening, after yet another tense meal, Elira confronted him directly. They were walking back through the marble corridors, their steps echoing against the high walls. Finally, she stopped and turned to him, her silver eyes flashing. "Do you think you can tame me, human?" she demanded, her voice sharp with anger. Do you think that if you sit there with your quiet patience, I will eventually bow to you? That I will melt like weak snow? Elias stood still, his hands clasped behind his back. His answer came slowly, with no fire, only calm truth. No, I don't want to tame you, princess. I don't want you to bow. I only want you to be free, even if that means you will never care for me. Elira's breath caught. For a second, she almost forgot how to speak. Free? No one had said that to her. Not her council, not her advisors, not even her family. To all of them, she was a tool of duty. But this human, this outsider, spoke as if her freedom mattered. The thought unsettled her deeply. She narrowed her eyes, hiding her confusion behind anger. Fine words. But words are wind, Captain. They mean nothing. He nodded once. Then I will not speak more than I must. I will show you instead. That night, Elira sat awake in her chambers, staring at the ceiling of carved stone. His voice echoed in her mind, I want you to be free. She pressed her hands against her chest, furious that his words would not leave her. The next days did not soften her. She continued to give him silence. At court, she stood tall beside him but did not look at him. In private meetings, she turned away as he spoke to the council. When they walked in the gardens, she kept her eyes on the stars, never on his face. But silence is not always strength. Silence can also be heavy, and though she tried to deny it, Elira began to feel that the weight was shifting, pressing more on her than on him. Because Elias never broke. He never tried to force his presence into her heart. Instead, he simply was. Steady. Quiet. Watching not her throne, not her crown, but her. One afternoon, as they walked along the crystal lake near the palace, Elira finally spoke without thinking. Why do you not fight back? She asked, her voice softer than before. Why do you not argue when I cut you down with my words? Why do you not defend yourself against their mockery? Elias paused, gazing at the still water. His reflection rippled gently beside hers. Because this isn't a battle, princess, he said simply. And you are not my enemy. Elira felt something twist inside her. For the first time, her silence failed her. She walked away quickly, leaving him behind, her chest tight with emotions she refused to name. That night, she stood by her balcony once again, staring at the twin moons. She told herself she hated him. She told herself he was weak. She told herself nothing had changed. But when she closed her eyes, she saw not a fragile human soldier. She saw calm eyes, steady and unafraid, telling her, You are not my enemy, and that was harder to bear than silence. The night before the binding ceremony arrived. The palace was alive with light and celebration, but in Elira's heart there was only storm. Everywhere she went, she felt the weight of eyes. The nobles watched her with hungry stares, whispering of power and alliance. The servants bowed deeper than usual, as if they pitied her but dared not speak. Even the stars beyond her balcony seemed colder, as though they too judged her fate. Elira had been strong for days. She had endured the cold dinners, the ceremonies, the endless silence between herself and the human captain. But tonight, when the final moment drew near, her strength cracked. She slipped quietly from her chamber, her robe flowing behind her like midnight shadow. The guards bowed but did not stop her. She was their princess, and her steps were her own. She walked down the long halls, past the sleeping palace, until she reached the gardens. The gardens of Karel were vast, filled with glowing flowers that opened only under moonlight. Crystal fountains whispered softly, their waters reflecting the two moons that hung above. Here Elira often came as a child when she needed peace. Tonight she came for air to breathe, air to think, air to imagine freedom. She sat on a stone bench beneath a tall silver tree, her hands clutching the edges of her robe. Her chest ached with the weight of choice. For the first time, she let herself whisper the thought that had been hiding in her mind for days. I could run, she said to the empty night. I could leave all of this behind. She imagined herself fleeing into the stars, no crown, no duty, no human husband bound to her for life. Just Elira, free at last. The picture tempted her so strongly that her breath shook, and then footsteps. She looked up sharply. From the shadows of the garden, Elias stepped into the moonlight. He wore no armor, no uniform, only a simple cloak. His dark eyes softened when they found her. But he did not come too close. Elira's voice was sharp. Are you following me, Captain? He shook his head. No, I couldn't sleep. The garden seemed quieter than the palace. Her heart beat harder in her chest. She looked away quickly, her voice tight. If you came to stop me, don't. You cannot cage me. Not you. Elias stood still for a long moment, his breath forming faint clouds in the cool air. Then he said softly but firmly, If you wish to run, Princess, I will not chase you. Her head snapped toward him. His eyes held no anger, no disappointment, only truth. I won't chain you, he continued. I won't hold you here by force. You don't deserve chains. Not from me, not from anyone. Alira's throat tightened. For days she had expected him to fight for her attention, to argue, to demand her respect. Yet here he was, telling her to go if she wished. It should have given her relief. Instead, it terrified her more than any prison. Why? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why would you let me go when all others want me bound? Elias stepped closer, just enough so that she could see the lines of weariness on his face. Because I know what it is to be trapped by duty. I know what it feels like to have no choice. I would not wish that on you, even if it costs me everything. Elira's hands trembled in her lap. No noble had ever spoken such words to her. No advisor, no court member, not even her family. They all saw her as a piece on the board. But this human, this fragile, short-lived soldier saw her as more. She turned her face away, hiding the tears forming in her eyes. Her voice shook with a mixture of anger and fear. You are a fool, Captain. A fool to think compassion will win me. Elias did not argue. He simply bowed his head slightly as though respecting her words and said, Then let me be a fool. The night was silent again. The fountains whispered. The flowers glowed and Elira sat frozen, torn between anger, confusion, and something deeper she dared not name. When Elias finally walked away, his footsteps fading into the distance, Elira pressed her hand against her heart. It was beating too fast, too wild, as though trying to escape her chest. She whispered to herself in the empty garden, Why does he make me feel this way? And the moons above gave her no answer. Dawn had barely touched the skies when the sound of alarms shook the Karel capital. The ground trembled as warning bells echoed through every tower and street. Princess Elira woke to the red glow of emergency lights filling her chamber. The air was heavy with dread. A messenger rushed in, his face pale. Your Highness! Enemy fleet sighted beyond the outer moons. They broke through the border defenses. They are heading straight for us, Elira froze. She knew who it was, the Drakthar. Old foes of her people, merciless raiders who had sworn to burn Karel to ashes. They had waited, watching, and now they struck at the moment of weakness on the eve of her binding ceremony. The council gathered quickly in the war hall. The nobles argued loudly, some panicked, some demanding retreat. Elira stood tall among them, her voice steady though her heart raced. We will not flee. We will fight for our home. As voices clashed, Elias entered. He wore his black human armor, the insignia of his people glinting on his chest. His presence drew the eyes of every Karel in the room. Many looked at him with doubt, some with disdain. But Elias did not flinch. His voice was strong. I'll stand on the front line. My people did not come here to watch your world fall. If Karel burns, then humanity burns with it. We fight together or not at all. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Even the nobles, sharp-tongued and prideful, could not speak. Elira felt a strange ache in her chest as she watched him. This man, this human, had no reason to give his life for her people. Yet his eyes held no hesitation. The decision was made. The Karel fleet and the humans stationed on the capital would rise together. The battle began before the suns had risen fully. From the palace balcony, Elira saw the sky torn with fire as enemy ships broke through the clouds. Explosions painted the horizon in red and gold. The air shook with thunder. Elira wanted to be out there, fighting as her ancestors had. But the council forced her to stay within the palace for protection. You are the last jewel of Karel, they said. If you fall, hope falls with you. And so she stood in the war hall, her hands gripping the rail as reports came in of losses, of victories, of blood spilled across the stars. Through the chaos, she heard one name again and again. Captain Ward has pushed the line forward. Captain Ward shields the wounded. Captain Ward holds the gate. Her chest tightened each time. She tried to remind herself he was only doing his duty, nothing more. But her heart would not listen. At last, news came that chilled her blood. The enemy has broken through the outer shield. They are in the capital's streets. Elira's breath stopped. The war was no longer above in the skies, it was here in her city. She wanted to run to the front, but before she could move, the doors of the hall burst open. Guards stumbled in, carrying a figure between them. His armor was broken, stained with smoke and blood. It was Elias. Illyra's heart slammed against her ribs as she rushed forward. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling. His face was pale, his breath ragged, but his eyes were still open. "What happened?" she demanded. One of the guards bowed his head. The enemy breached the eastern gate. He stood alone to cover the retreat. He saved dozens, maybe hundreds, but he took the blow himself. Elias coughed, blood at the corner of his lips. Yet when he looked at her, he managed a faint smile. "Still standing, Princess," he whispered. "Can't let them take your home." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her hands against his wound, desperate, refusing to let him slip away. For the first time, the wall around her heart shattered completely. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, Elias, don't leave me." "Don't you dare." His hand, rough and shaking, brushed against hers. "You'll be fine without me. Stronger than you know." "No," she said fiercely, tears falling onto his armor. "I don't want to be strong without you." In that moment, as fire lit the skies outside and the city trembled under war, Illyra realized the truth she had fought to deny. This human had given her what no one else had: choice, compassion, love without demand, and the thought of losing him broke her in a way no battle ever could. The palace chambers that once glowed with calm light now smelled of smoke and medicine. The healers worked quickly, their glowing instruments moving over Elias's broken body. His armor had been cut away and his chest rose weakly with each breath. Illyra stood at his side, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the bed. She had faced war before. She had seen soldiers fall, but this was different. Every sound of his labored breath cut into her like a blade. The healer looked up at her, voice grave. "He has lost much blood. His body is not like ours. Human bones and flesh are weaker. We are doing what we can, but it may not be enough." Illyra shook her head fiercely, her silver hair falling loose from its braids. "No, he will live. He has to live." For hours she stayed by him, refusing to leave even when the council summoned her. She pressed a damp cloth to his forehead, whispered words he could not hear, and held his hand as though her touch alone could anchor him to life. When the healers stepped away for rest, Illyra finally leaned close, her voice breaking into the silence. "You foolish human. Why did you throw yourself into the fire? Why would you risk everything for a people not your own?" Her tears fell onto his skin and she did not wipe them away. For so long she had sworn never to let a human touch her heart, and now, here she was, begging one not to leave it. Elias stirred faintly, his eyelids heavy. His lips moved with effort. "Because your people are yours, and you deserve more than chains." Her breath caught. She had thought he was unconscious, lost to pain. Yet even on the edge of death, his words were not about himself, they were about her. Always about her freedom, always about her heart. Illyra bent her head close to his, whispering fiercely, "You cannot leave me. Do you hear? I forbid it. Not as your princess, not as your duty, but as the woman who—" Her voice faltered, but she forced the words out, raw and trembling. "As the woman who loves you." The confession fell into the still air, soft but unbreakable. Elias's lips curved in the faintest smile, though his eyes did not open. "Then I'll fight harder. For you." Her chest ached, but this time it was not from anger or chains. It was from love, terrifying, beautiful, and fragile. The night stretched long. Outside, the city still smoldered, though the enemy had been driven back. Soldiers guarded the palace gates and the council argued in the war hall. But Illyra remained in that room, refusing to move. She remembered her promise as a child never to be weak, never to cry before her people. But with Elias, she let the tears fall freely. She stroked his rough hand, whispered stories of her childhood, told him of the gardens, the rivers, the skies of her world. "Stay with me," she begged quietly. "You have not seen all of Corel yet. You have not walked the mountain paths or flown beneath the crystal arches. You cannot leave before I show you my world, our world." Every rise and fall of his chest became a prayer. Every flicker of his pulse beneath her hand felt like a victory. At dawn, the healer returned, eyes surprised. "He is stronger. His heart fights still. Somehow he holds on." Relief shook Illyra's body, and for the first time in many days she smiled. Not the cold smile of a princess, but the soft, trembling smile of a woman who had almost lost everything. She leaned close to Elias's ear and whispered with fierce tenderness, "You hear that? You are not leaving me, Elias Ward, not now, not ever. And though he did not answer, his hand shifted weakly in hers, holding on. In that moment, Illyra knew. This human had changed her life forever. No throne, no council, no war could undo what had been born between them. Her heart was no longer hers alone. It was theirs. Days passed slowly in the palace chambers. The war outside had quieted, but inside, Illyra's world was still tied to one fragile heartbeat. Elias lay in bed, recovering with the stubborn strength only humans seem to have. Each day, Illyra stayed by his side. She fed him warm broth when his hand shook too much. She changed his bandages even when the healers insisted they could do it. And every night, when the halls were silent, she whispered promises into the darkness. One evening, Elias opened his eyes fully. His gaze was tired but steady. "Still here?" he asked weakly. Illyra's lips trembled into a smile. "Where else would I be? You nearly left me, human." "I cannot forgive that," he gave a soft laugh, though it turned into a cough. "I told you I'd fight harder. Looks like I kept my word." For a moment, the chamber filled with quiet laughter and quiet tears. The barrier between alien princess and human soldier had vanished. All that remained was two souls bound together by pain, by sacrifice, and by love. But outside their room, the council grew restless. The war had been costly. They wanted their princess strong, unbroken, and loyal to her people. Illyra knew whispers filled the halls, that her heart had grown too close to the human. One morning, the council summoned her. "You must choose," the eldest elder said firmly. "Our people respect you, but they cannot follow a ruler who favors an outsider. The human is brave, yes, but he is still not one of us. Release him, end this." Bond. Illyra stood tall, though her chest ached. Her voice was clear, but her hands clenched tightly. "Release him? You speak as though he is a chain, but he is no chain. He is the key that freed me." The council murmured in shock, but she did not stop. "Since my birth, I have been told my life belongs to duty, that my heart belongs to no one, only to the throne. Yet when fire fell on our city, when enemies rose against us, it was not duty that saved us. It was him, a human, a man who owed us nothing yet gave everything." Her eyes softened, though her tone stayed fierce. "You ask me to give him up. I will not. I'm not only a princess, I am Illyra, and I choose him." The chamber grew silent. The council could not argue with the truth in her voice. They saw the strength in her eyes, the fire that no tradition could snuff out. When she returned to Elias's room, he looked at her, confused. "The council? What did they say?" She sat beside him, took his hand, and for the first time spoke without hesitation. "They asked me to give you up. I told them no. I told them I choose you. Not because of duty, not because of politics, but because I love you." Elias's breath caught. For a soldier who had faced death without fear, this moment nearly broke him. "Illyra, are you certain? Your throne, your people." "My people need a leader who chooses with her heart," she interrupted gently. "And my heart has chosen you." His hand tightened around hers. No words could match the weight of that moment. For the first time since he left Earth, Elias felt he belonged, not as a soldier, not as a tool, but as a man who was loved. Weeks later, when he could finally stand again, the city held a gathering in the Crystal Square. Illyra walked beside him, no longer hiding her choice. Her people watched in silence as their princess held the hand of a human. Some frowned, some whispered, but many cheered. They had seen his courage. They remembered how he had stood in fire for their future. Illyra raised her voice, strong and steady. "This is Elias Ward, a human, yes, but more than that, a warrior, a protector, and the man I will share my life with. From this day, let no barrier of world or blood divide us. We are stronger together." The cheer that followed was not perfect, but it was real. For the first time, the people saw a future where alien and human could stand side by side. That night, as the stars lit the skies of Karel, Elias and Illyra stood on the palace balcony. The city glowed below, alive with hope. Elias wrapped a careful arm around her, still weak but steady. "You know," he said softly, "back on Earth they told us humans could never be more than soldiers here. Guess we proved them wrong." Illyra rested her head against his shoulder, her voice tender. "Yes, Elias, you showed me that love is not weakness. It is the greatest strength." And under the endless stars, the alien princess and the human soldier began a story not of duty, but of choice. A story of compassion, sacrifice, and a love strong enough to bridge two worlds. The princess had once dreaded a marriage to a human, but in the end it was love for a human that set her free.